Good evening, everyone. My name is John Longan, and I'm the coach of the speech team here at Bethany Lutheran College. And on behalf of the entire speech team, I want to welcome you to our annual home concert. Every year about this time, people ask me, why do you call it a home concert? Well, pretty simple. When you think of a concert, you think of people performing for an audience. Normally, when the speech team performs, we're actually competing against other people in similar categories. But tonight, there's no competition. Tonight, we're performing for you. And since it's our home concert, we're performing it for our home people. So sit back, enjoy the show. The easiest way to explain what the home concert is for you to see it. So our first performance of the evening is a program oral interpretation by Leah Blocker.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word organized itself in order to organize by way of little commandments. Gather ye animals 2 by 2. Send invoice for La Gioconda. Pick up milk on the way home to Ithaca. To start, I should make one thing clear. I love lists. There are two kinds of people in this world. Those who make lists and those who rely on those who make lists. Americans love a lot of things. Freedom, toasted corn muffins, overdeveloped abdominal muscles. But number one on that list is lists. The etymology of the word list shows that in its Germanic origin, it meant a desire or a pleasure. Today, our lists are a collection of our desires and pleasures, such as in a list of what I want to do today, a list of my top 10 favorite BuzzFeed lists, or ultimately, our bucket lists. Our lists define what we want in life. So when we let other people control our lists, we let other people control who we are. Through the videos, Americans Love Lists by Kirby Ferguson, Lists from Tales of Mere Existence, the poetry, List Making by Vern Ratzala, and the prose, How Your Obsessive List Making Can Help You Love People by Steve Weeds, How Reading Lists Almost Ruined My Life by Haley Grogan, On Lists and List Making by Gregory Nami, and Addicted to Lists by Deborah C. Nelson. A program on life through our lists. The USA is a list-loving land, polled elections, the VH1, 10 Commandments. Lists give America its tighter abs, its 10 surefire ways to spice things up in the bedroom. Without lists, how would we know who the 50 sexiest men alive are? They could be dead already. We wouldn't know. List makers fall into the following categories, ranging from abnormal, number 1, to completely irrevocably OCD. Number 1, those who use Post-its. Number 2, those who use apps. Number 3, those who use Pinterest. And number 4, those who use 3-ring binders and label makers. Yeah. Lists are an important part of my existence. They keep me organized, they keep me on task. They give me a goal toward which my undiagnosed obsessive-compulsive self can work. Cross everything off. Finishing the list means A, a whole lot of stuff just got done, and B, I'm most likely feeling pretty good about myself. Usually when I start a new list, it's done with the intention of making all the things I have to get done feel less intimidating. I sometimes put things on my list that I know will be really easy to do so that when I cross them off, I feel a sense of accomplishment. So all lists are good then, right? Wrong. I'm currently recovering from what I refer to as reading list shock syndrome. So there I was browsing the internet on a lazy summer Saturday, and then I read a tweet. 11 books you should read if you're a woman in your 20s. Hey, you're a woman in your 20s, I thought. You like books. So I clicked. And my life changed. Whatever sorrow howls in the cold wind, we still make our lists, our maps of tomorrow, giving direction, place, and time, assuming morning, assuming sunrise. And maybe our lists are what bring us our nightly serving of regret. This fog around us of the done and not done. William Shakespeare wrote this in reference to the world we live in. And yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Hey Bill, iron, oxygen, magnesium, silicon, done, print it. If William Shakespeare used PowerPoint, he could have saved a lot of time. Stage 1 of reading list shock syndrome. Underestimation of task ahead. 11 books isn't so bad, you might say. Yeah, that's what I said too. The problem is at stage 2, realization that there are lists everywhere sets in almost immediately. All of a sudden, the internet was full of reading lists, and pretty soon I had 681 books. Yet we have these memo pads, these date books, these dog-eared lists scrawled with things to do, aimed to still our heart of accidents and turn our days predictable and safe. But so many things weren't done, the invisible duty, the item lost in a fold. And maybe it's the undone that inhabits our night with regret. Or maybe it's just that habit of mind. I will tell you right now that I'm a list maker. I won't tell you which category I fall into, except to say that I do not understand Pinterest, except that it is the way that women plan weddings, like those who are already married or have no fiance. Still, last week a question barged into my brain unannounced without the help of lists of any variety. Do I tend to my relationships the way I tend to my lists? Stage 3, extreme feelings of being overwhelmed. 681 books? At the rate of one per day, it would take me almost 2 years. One a week, 13 years, and there goes my youth. So I entered stage 4, futile attempts to get started. I frequently write my lists in bed at night with the idea that, well, today was crappy because I didn't get enough stuff done on my list, but tomorrow will be much, much better if I just really get down and do all the things on my list. But in the heat, we trace the morning's spidery script and remember how it led us through our day, how, in fact, it held our cautious day together. Without the list, we knew we would have lost ourselves completely, or worse, expected heroics of ourselves, some decisive move. What if I made new Evernote notebooks according to the names of my favorite people? Then, when I was with those people, I could notice things. Their favorite Starbucks drink is a grande vanilla latte with extra whip. They strongly dislike the color mauve. Then I would slyly add these details to Evernote, pretending I was checking Twitter, and with the new reminders features, Evernote could remind me to call these people once in a while, or buy them their favorite drink at Starbucks without having to ask, or not buy them anything mauve. I promised myself that as long as it didn't involve labels, it was a good idea. I also sometimes write a little note of motivation at the top of my list. Sometimes I write it like a bunch of cheerleaders, and sometimes like my 3rd grade teacher saying, "You have to get these things done. No messing around." But you know, I've come to realize that it doesn't really matter if I get everything done on my list or nothing done on my list, because I always go to bed at night feeling like I didn't get enough stuff done, and tomorrow I should make sure to write a much, much better list. I was all ready to get started. Before I remembered that I was already in the middle of a book, and I was loving every page. So after much fretting, sweating, weeping, gnashing of teeth, I made up my mind to begin stage 5, acceptance. See, I realized that just because someone out there recommended those books to me doesn't mean that I'm obligated to read them all. You see, obligation takes away so much of the joy. Putting down Embassy Town to pick up one of those listed books might have made me feel like I was accomplishing something. But so will finishing Embassy Town. Armed with lists, we knew we would survive at least until the next appointment. We loved the ease of this, and then this, and next this, knowing we were here, say at item 7, safe, with many more to go. But of course it's caught up with us, which is why we now monitor about roads not taken, missed dates in wind and rain, the diminished thing, our lives stretching backwards, sleepless with regret for the act that withered itself undone because it wasn't on the list. So who's with me? I'm sick of being preoccupied with lists and tasks and trying to get it all done. The point is to use the energy of your life on the things that matter most. Like planning weddings on Pinterest when you're already married. The older you get, the faster time passes. Time is the most precious gift you have, as precious as life itself. So why become slaves to a time management system? You see, traditional time management that utilizes lists and prioritizing can induce feelings of guilt, failure, and stress, and results in the perception of a time shortage. Be honest with yourself. Are your lists really working? Is everything you do each day going on your list? Your life is more than a list of things to do.
of your grandpa's corduroy jackets could you buy with $3 billion? Well, if you're like me and would spend about $10 a piece on one, you could buy about 300 million of them, or enough to put one on the back of almost every single American citizen. But why are these numbers important to remember? Well, according to Goodwill Industries' official homepage, $3 billion was how much money they were worth just last year. And according to yours truly, $10 was the price of a corduroy jacket at the Goodwill just down the street last week. Now, Goodwill is part of one of the fastest growing industries in the United States of America, the industry of secondhand. So today, we'll talk about just how prominent this industry has become in the US. We'll talk about why now is the time for it to gain such popularity. And finally, we'll wrap it up with the economic implications that it imposes on our society, both good and bad, all of which will help you realize why old is the new cool. Now, before we can talk about economic implications or why popularity has skyrocketed for this industry, we must first talk about just how big it has become. We will do so by first talking about thrift shops, then pawn shops, and finally the combination of auction homes and garage sales. Now, the first and probably the most prominent of all resources currently selling secondhand gear is that of the thrift shop. Now, thrift shops are typically thought of as non-profit organizations who generate proceeds but donate them all to charities. Others, however, are run as a business with the idea of making as much revenue as possible. Goodwill falls into the latter of the two categories. Now, Goodwill Industries, one of America's largest thrift store chains, recently expanded to over 2,700 stores across 15 countries, according to a USA Today article written by Jessica Tully in July of 2012. Since the company opened its doors in 1902, Goodwill has been trying to maintain a great public image by selling higher-end merchandise to lower-income families without busting their pocketbooks. They've done a fantastic job and recently just surpassed their $3.5 billion mark in total sales. Now, another thrift giant, the Salvation Army, has also seen its numbers rise as of late. The Salvation Army employed 3.4 million volunteers just last year, according to their official page at salvationarmy.org. The Salvation Army is active in over 122 countries, and on a domestic level, they're active in over 5,000 communities right here in the United States. When you add up the number of stores that the Salvation Army plus Goodwill have in the US, you come up with 7,700 stores. To put that number into perspective for you, Walmart, America's largest retailer, has 8,500 stores in the entire world. Moving forward then, a second type of store selling secondhand merchandise is that of the pawn shop. Now, pawn shops are no longer that stereotypical store that people shop in who are down on their luck looking to make a quick dollar. In fact, that status quo is completely different now, as pawn shops are looked upon more favorably than banks to get a microloan, and they're also just a fun place to shop. According to the Miami Herald's June of 2012 edition, there are over 12,000 operating pawn shops in the US today, and that number continues to rise here in 2014. The exact amount of revenue that a pawn shop generates is very hard to track, mostly because each pawn shop is completely dependent on the community that they're involved in. No one knows who's going to come in and buy what type of gear on any given day. However, in a recent phone interview conducted with the corporate office of Pawn America, one of the larger pawn shop stores in the United States, it was made known that they have 28 stores scattered across the upper Midwest, the largest of which, located in Madison, Wisconsin, generated over $10 million in gross profit just last year. Finally then, the third resource selling secondhand merchandise is that of the combination of auction homes and garage sales. There are so many garage sales that take place in a given weekend in the US that they're impossible to count. However, the Mankato Free Press confirms that with this nicer weather, 15 are going to take place this weekend. Now, they may seem like little sales, but there are actually quite a few dollars that change hands here. According to the Huffington Post's May of 2012 edition, a minimum of $300 changes hands at even the most basic of garage sales. Now, according to Census.gov, there were 132.5 million homes in the US in 2011. So, of those 132.5 million homes, let's say that 100,000 of them are having a garage sale on a given weekend. If you compute that $300 is changing hands at even the most basic of these sales, you wind up with $30 million changing hands at garage sales alone across America on a given weekend. And that's even the lowest of estimates. Now that we understand just how big the industry has become, we can turn our attention to why now is the time for it to gain such popularity. We will do so by first talking about the recession, then the impacts of mass media, and finally the overall quality of the merchandise up for sale. Now, first and foremost, there is no question that the US has suffered a period of economic turmoil as of late, and naturally that has forced the hands of many Americans to turn to money-saving alternatives such as thrift shopping. What this means is that thrift shopping in stores like Goodwill and the Salvation Army offer clothing at cheaper prices and other basic necessities so people can come in and purchase what they need right now for cheaper amounts of money and then have more to save for future expenses, whatever life throws their way. And this is an option that the American family will not pass up in today's market. Moving forward, a second reason for the popularity boom of secondhand is that of the impacts of mass media. TV shows and songs have been made as of late that promote people of all different types to go out and get involved in this industry. It talks about how people of all different types of social class can also get involved and do it together. TV shows such as Pawn Stars, American Pickers, Storage Wars, and Auction Kings have all whetted the appetites for many Americans to get involved in this industry. Songs such as, you guessed it, Thrift Shop by Macklemore encourage people to go out and buy grandpa's clothes. And they also talk about how many different things a $20 bill can buy you in today's economy. So needless to say, mass media has given a push in the positive direction for this growing industry. And finally then, the third reason for the popularity skyrise of this newer industry is that of the overall quality of what's for sale. Now, decades ago, hand-me-downs were looked down upon with a negative connotation because most of the time they were tattered and torn garments of clothing that no one wanted to wear anymore. Nowadays, that is completely different, as families who are willing to and able to donate what they do not need to stores such as Goodwill and Salvation Army. And therefore, we can see that what's hanging on the racks at Goodwill for $3 is also hanging on the racks at Kohl's for $30. Now, when the American family sees this price difference, they're going to choose the cheaper stuff if it's the same quality. So therefore, we can see that this money-saving alternative is very beneficial for the lower-income American family. Now that we see just how big these industries become and also why it's gained such popularity, we can look at the economic implications that it imposes on our society. We will do so by first exploring how on an individual level, thrifting is good, how it's not so good on a national level, and finally give an example of exploitation from within. Now first, as we've already been talking about through most of this entire speech, thrifting is very beneficial for the individual consumer because they can buy what they need, their basic necessities, right now for cheaper amounts of money and have more to spend for future expenses. However, thrift shopping in turn may actually be contributing to our nation's inability to pull out of our recession. According to an article published on thinkadvisor.com, a leading economic website in June of 2013, this thrift paradox actually is causing more Americans to save their money rather than go out and spend it. As a result, the federal economy suffers because massive amounts of spending is what makes it grow. This article also does a fantastic job of pointing out how the American family is no longer buying into the motto of their heavily spending parents and grandparents, and also how they bought into the old saying that money just can't buy you happiness. Finally then, let's give an example of exploitation from within this growing and booming industry. Unfortunately, this example also comes in the form of Goodwill. Now, Goodwill hires disabled employees, which from the outside looking in may seem like a very nice thing for them to do. However, when one explores the ulterior motives for these hirings, all he or she can do is cringe. For example, according to an article published on Forbes.com on July 30th, 2013, Goodwill pays up to 70% of its workforce below minimum wage, and in many cases it's much below. In Pennsylvania alone last year, certain employees were being paid $22, $38, and 41 cents per hour worked. Now, Goodwill has countered, saying that the Fair Labor Standards Act allows them to pay disabled employees below minimum wage. But when you're a billion-dollar corporation, your CEO makes over $500 million a year in base salary before incentives, and your store managers of larger branches also make 6 digits a year, is it really necessary to continue on in this trend? As it turns out, Goodwill may actually be harming the people who had set out to help over 100 years ago. In conclusion then today, we've talked a little bit about just how big the industry of secondhand has become in the United States of America. We've talked about why now is the time for it to gain such popularity, and we wrapped it up with the economic implications that it imposes to us. Now, whether you realize it or not, stores such as the Salvation Army and Goodwill are here to stay. They're becoming a norm in our society. So, the next time you go out and spend 99 cents for a pair of moccasins someone else has been walking in, be proud of yourself, because you just contributed a very small portion into one of America's newest billion-dollar industries.
So our 4 debaters that went to the National Christian College Tournament this year are about to come up and give a presentation on what it's like to be a debater.
Thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate this great audience. And now we're going to talk about arguing, which I'm sure you all came for. Because you don't want to be entertained, you want to talk about arguing. If you remember when you were a teenager, or when you're going to have teenagers soon, this used to be a regimented part of your life between complaining about supper and complaining about your best friend's significant other. This happened on a daily basis. So now we're going to talk about arguing, but constructive arguing, and how sometimes it's the great glory of victory, the crush of defeat, and sometimes we talk about Justin Bieber too, so that's fun. But it's easier to first establish what debate isn't.
Okay, so one of the first things debate is not is one of those presidential debates where you have these two people pretty much just yelling at one another, trying to make themselves look pretty and popular and somewhat intelligent, all while a poor and helpless journalist is stuck in the middle, trying to bring some peace and order to the situation, and getting them to answer a very simple question.
Yeah, going on from that, a lot of people don't understand how civil a typical debate round is. They think it's just a lot of people screaming and yelling at each other like, hey, you're ugly, no, you're Hitler. Like, it's really not quite that terrible. While there are definitely some arguments that can get a little bit messy, which we'll talk about later, it's much more civil and much more educational.
Debate also is not a bunch of college students sitting around talking about their pet projects, like legalizing marijuana, for example. Because often we sit around, we talk about it, we say, hey, college students are great, and if we sit in a giant drum circle, the world is going to be such a better place. Debate is also not that.
Likewise, debate is not constant conflict and arguing that all of a sudden ends in world peace. You don't go out of the room thinking, oh, we just solved the world's problems. It's a stepping stone.
So now we're going to talk about some of the things that define debate, and let's start with a preface here. I would really, really enjoy if debate was completely about the musician Prince from Minnesota. Like, if you could win by just simply being versed in every Prince lyric possible, and you could like talk about how great he is, that would be awesome. Unfortunately, that's not what debate is. And I was really sad when John told me that when I first came to debate, but I guess it's sort of grown on me. But there's really 4 key elements of debate.
Well, since I am not from Minnesota, thankfully the Prince logic is not there. But what it does involve is actual logic. Being able to learn and understand arguments, being able to understand the world around you, and actually have some general knowledge.
Going off logic, you also have to have a lot of critical thinking skills, because at the beginning of any round, as John mentioned, you're giving a different resolution, which is basically a prompt for you to base the round off of, and you kind of have to narrow your focus in order to make sure that your debate round is as focused as possible, and it's easy to argue for yourself.
Yeah, and while there are a lot of good things, it's not always hunky-dory, sunshine, smiles, and flowers every day either when you come in to do a debate round. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit of a conflict of interest because you have 2 people with opposing views sometimes who are on the same team trying to say that their side is going to be better, more better. I'm good at speech. You're really good at that kind of stuff when you practice all over and over again. But basically, you got to try to pick which one of your cases or working together, which is going to be the best for your team overall. And sometimes that can cause a little bit of friction.
And finally, debate is lots and lots and lots of coffee. There are no sort of casual caffeine users on the debate circuit. Everyone just pumps it through in an IV. We don't. But really, debate takes a lot out of you. I mean, sometimes you're debating 6 rounds in a day, and each round lasts an hour, and each round's a different topic that ranges from the Affordable Care Act to ethics to something as stupid as Justin Bieber. So it requires a lot of energy on any given day, and it really puts debaters through the meat grinder. But now it's important to talk about what is debate. So now we sort of give you a preface. What are the kinds of debate you could possibly have, in case you're interested?
Yeah, the first and probably the most typical of all different kinds of debate policies you're going to see is that of a policy debate. This one is basically which side can prove that their side of the case is more beneficial to whatever the outcome may be. An example here is the Affordable Care Act. So sometimes you'll have a government team who is for the Affordable Care Act's implementation, and they're going to try to prove why, if we install it into our system, why it's more beneficial. The opposition team or the negative team will try to come up and say that the status quo is better the way it is, and if we implement the Affordable Care Act, it's just going to go downhill from there. So basically, at the end of the day, whoever proves that their side is better will win the round.
Another common form of debate is value debates. Here you're basically talking about differing ideas of how to view the world. Take, for example, freedom or security. Bringing the NSA, you could always say that the NSA security measures has harmed our freedom, or you could go the other route and say that the NSA security measures has increased our freedom. So you kind of debate different abstract ideas.
The final kind of debate that isn't as common is called a case study. And this is very interesting because you're given a proposition, a story. So for example, someone is trying medical treatments that might save a life, but maybe those medical treatments aren't the most clandestine options. So kind of like the Hitler question. If you could go back in time when Hitler was a child and murder that child before Hitler committed the Holocaust, would that be morally acceptable? More important, would you be morally obligated to kill child Hitler? That's kind of what the case study is presenting. And we as students from Bethany Lutheran College live in a world where we're going to have to debate ethics every single day. And it really puts us right in an uncomfortable place, having to debate whether something is morally acceptable or not. And it's never black and white. So now we should talk a little bit about the resolution, because you can't have a debate without a resolution. As we talked about, it changes different rounds. So here are some common examples of resolutions.
Yeah, one of the first resolutions that Will and I encountered this debate season was resolved. The United States federal government will substantially change its position towards the United Nations. The way Will and I interpret it is that the United Nations currently has a policy in which it declares drone strikes or drone warfare to be an international crime. The United States currently does not have that same idea towards their set of drone strikes, so we said that we were going to change our plan, meaning that we're going to implement the same ideas at UN and declare all drone strikes to be a war crime.
Another resolution that I received this year was this House believes that austerity is preferable to stimulus. So this debate basically broke down into this really good economic discussion of what's better for the economy. Is it cutting taxes and cutting spending, or is it pushing a ton of money from the government and trying to jumpstart the economy? And it really boiled down to a great debate about economic principles that you just sort of have to know off the top of your head. Unfortunately, debates aren't always like this. Sometimes you just have to know stupid things about pop culture, and here it is.
Thus, the debate that Sean and I actually had to go through. This debate, the resolution said this House would quarantine Bieber fever. Now, when any debater is actually faced with Justin Bieber, it's their worst nightmare. Next to them would be a war. But what we actually did was able to debate this in a logical manner, talking about the freedoms of speech and the value of freedom of speech over the idea of media, news, and press. So we turned this topic that was very pop culture into something that actually had some logic to it.
Yeah, and this resolution basically demonstrates how the government team can really define the case however they see fit, because in the end we basically argued how news should be presented to viewers, whether it should be through an informational lens and whether it should be focused on the entertainment side. And we basically had to justify that Justin Bieber was news because he was that.
So before every debate, you get the resolution, and then you have 15 minutes of prep time. And so in that preparation time, you're thinking about your case, and sometimes you spend it very wisely, like Jeff and Sean.
So when we get into prep time, the first thing we do is we try to decide what of the types they actually are. Yes, the pictures are funny. But so we go through and we decide what types of debate there actually are and what you're supposed to do there with that, and then we go through and create our case. And depending on whether we're for the resolution or against the resolution, that really determines whether or not we can decide the round or have to work against something else that's being decided for us.
Yeah, and prep times also used to take down all the knowledge you have about a specific topic, such as national debt, and focus it on a very specific issue that is involved with national debt, so that you can focus the debate. So it's not this broad, abstract thing, but it's a very focused and very arguable and very applicable debate.
And sometimes you don't spend your prep time well, and it boils down to talking about different subjects, like food.
Will and I sometimes find ourselves in this predicament where we're debating what's better in food services in Mankato. But really, sometimes when you are the opposition team, you really have no idea what the government is going to run. For instance, one time this past fall, Will and I actually were privileged to be the government team for a very abstract resolution that said this House would raise the debt. And so we decided to raise the Gingrich-King Compromise of the 1990s. Now, show of hands, how many people know what that is? Exactly. So, exactly going off that lines, the opposition really didn't know what the heck we were going to run, and I guarantee you they weren't prepping for that case. So, sometimes you really have no clue.
Yeah. So then finally looking at some of the bad that comes from parliamentary debate. So these are all things that we have heard during the season from other teams.
This one here is one of my personal favorites. This is going back to the Justin Bieber resolution that we were talking about earlier. We came up and said Justin Bieber is a terrible influence on today's youth because he was caught drunk driving in Florida, also under the influence of marijuana. To which the opposition team stood up and said, drunk driving doesn't always kill people. To which I responded, wow, what a great philosophical insight. So this is probably, if you categorize it as the good, the bad, and the ugly, here's a sample of the ugly.
Another resolution that we encountered at the beginning of the year was that this House would change its name. And we thought that they would run something about the Washington Redskins because it was in the middle of that racially charged controversy about the team name. Instead, the other team decided to find it as this. We're going to take this resolution to mean that the United States of America should change its name to America. The only way this could have been worse is if they would have tried to change it to apostrophe Murica.
And finally, you have some of the sillier sides of the debate, where Jorge and I were actually forced to debate Star Wars versus Star Trek. Well, the opposing team was for Star Wars, and yet that's what came out of their mouth.
True story.
And probably one of the worst arguments that come out of a debate round is that everything will lead to nuclear war. Take, for example, failing to raise the federal minimum wage. By failing to raise the federal minimum wage, the poor people in the United States will rise up against the government and the 1%. Next, they'll form a super powerful paramilitary organization that will then take over all military or nuclear arsenals inside the United States. Next, they'll of course bomb China simply because China taking over all of America's jobs, then China will retaliate on the United States by bombing the United States. Of course, this will increase instability between India and Pakistan, who will use their nuclear weapons to bomb one another. Next, Al-Qaeda will take advantage of this instability by taking nuclear material to build a dirty bomb to use against Israel. Of course, Israel will be bombing Middle Eastern nations such as Syria and Iran. Russia will then attack Israel simply because they attacked Syria. And of course, what's ever left of NATO will bomb Russia, and North Korea will then bomb who's ever left. And there you have it. Nuclear winter simply because the United States failed to raise the minimum wage. And oftentimes, a team just uses this to sound dramatic and sound very stupid.
Well said, Sean. Very good. But there's also the good of debate as well. We remember the bad because it's so awful. But there are good parts of every debate as well. And the first thing to talk about then is open-mindedness. I know this is a testy word because Bethany Lutheran College, very black and white. But you have to understand that when you go into debate round, you can be a staunch fiscal conservative, somehow arguing the Affordable Care Act is the greatest idea you've ever seen. And you have to do that. But what it allows you to do is get you a better viewpoint on every single issue possible. You have to know every issue from every side. And not only does it make you a better thinker, it makes you a better person in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Going off of that, the educational experience that you get from a debate round is astonishing, really. We have 7 team members that participated in debate this year, so 7 out of the 10 who were at tournaments actually at least tried debate once, which was pretty awesome numbers this year. Also, the idea here that is that all 7 of those people came from different major backgrounds. They have their own different kind of information, knowledge pool that they're bringing in and sharing with the rest of the team. So basically, you can have a completely different stance that you never even thought about with a certain resolution, and there you are adapting it to your own side of the case to use it as an asset. And it's really educational in that sense because you're going to be using things not just now, but in your future careers as well.
Another great aspect of debate is compromise and discussion. I know that doesn't sound natural with 2 teams supposed to be fighting against each other, but that's really what happens. Is by the end of the round, what you should be able to do is respect your opponents enough that you can continue the conversation outside of the round after you've argued the fact. And so really debate is the sparking point for discussion and further communication.
And bringing together all 3 of these, it talks about real-world issues, such as Crimea or Syria. You're looking at viable solutions on how to solve these very complex and very intricate problems, pretty much as they're happening. So you're pretty much talking about bringing some peace and tranquility to the world in a very chaotic place, and that's a good thing.
But by far the best part about debate is team bonding. Being together with teammates is awesome. I mean, he has a nickname that professors call him because we made it up, like the collective us made that name up for him. And it stuck with it because of the team bonding that takes place in debate. I mean, at your best moments, debate is like any sport. It's like a war zone. It's like being a field marshal marching in front of your troops at times. It's that intense. But you get that with debate. When you're prepping with 4 college kids on a Friday night about different aspects of the Affordable Care Act, instead of playing video games and eating pizza, you realize you have some pretty special people with you. And I think we're all friends as a result because of debate. So, in conclusion, thank you for being here with us tonight and partaking of this weird talk about arguing. We really appreciate you listening, and maybe you'll try debate on next year. Thank you.
Our final performance this evening is an after-dinner speech by Sean Logging.
Every summer, 130,000 people flock to the biggest event in a nerd's life. And no, this is not when this iPhone drops. This is so much bigger, and frankly, just so much better. This is San Diego Comic-Con International. Here, the who's who of I still live in my parents' basement. I run a semi-successful blog about that one show, and I'm Thunder Poundsin. I'm Batman. Suck it in. Come together to celebrate this fandom paradise. This odyssey of the mind, everything from books, comics, anime, video games, movies, television shows, and kinkier stuff. For those into that sort of thing, like My Little Pony. This extremely addictive and love affair of popular culture leads us to today's topic, fandom, the extreme fan base that supports the entertainment industry. While there are a bunch of fandoms all around us, most of them we do not want to know anything about. According to Stacey Abbott's 2013 book, The Cult TV Book, she explains that part of the television industry to survive, they need fans to create fandom. So as any good fanboy or fangirl, we need to understand how the television industry is controlling us with fandom. To do this, we'll first beam aboard the definitions, enter the dimension of the television industry, before finally taking a bite into some of the good and bad of fandom. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of Starship fandom on our ongoing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life forms and new civilizations, to boldly go where no nerd has ever gone before. And sadly, it's not a date. Star Trek has long reached the status of fandom, especially with the intense debate of who's better, Captain Kirk or Picard. First, we need to beam aboard the definitions and how fandom is formed. To most people, fandom is a gigapalooza, and you just shrug it off like it's not even there. So totally uncool. According to Mark Dovett's 2013 book, Understanding Fandom, he defines fandom as a way of identifying oneself on a deep level as being a fan and enacting that role. So basically, nerds. These nerds are then classified by their dictions. You have Boovins, who are defined by the Oxford English Dictionary as fans of the British television series Doctor Who. Hey, Professor DeGarmo. Trekkies are fans of Star Trek. Not to be confused with Trekkers, the actual actors in the franchise. Just don't go there. And then you have Bronies, which are what we call male fans between the ages of 16 and 25 of the show My Little Pony. Seriously. According to the PBS Awful Video, Can Fandom Change Society? However, it's important to understand that if you're a fan, there's probably a fandom out there for you. Because you get a fandom, you get a fandom, you get a fandom, everyone gets a fandom! It just doesn't come with a car. Fandom form, according to the previously mentioned Can Fandom Change Society, because fans want to take a more active role in their culture. Not just watch a show, but make the universe and mythology part of their own culture. To do this, they create works of fan fiction, which are fictional works based off of children's mythology, by adding in their own input, like the travesty of placing the cast of Glee in the Middle Earth of J.R.R. Tolkien. Just no. In addition, you have fan art, fan videos, and dedicated fan websites, infested with spoilers. But most importantly, you have cosplay, or costume play, where fans dress up and act like their favorite characters and truly be a Jedi before Disney sends you a cease and desist. By understanding these definitions and formation, this underground culture is getting beamed in some much needed sunlight. You are entering another dimension, a dimension not of time or space, but of mind, a journey into the wondrous boundaries which are that of imagination. Your next stop, the television industry. The Twilight Zone, not to be confused with that drivel called Twilight. First read on CBS in 1959, and paved the way for their cult television shows because of its high concept, forcing the audience to think and be more active in the show. Nerds just shouldn't do that. This now requires us to enter the dimension of the television industry's desire to create fandom. According to editors of the 2004 book, Cult Television, Sarah Jenowin Jones and Roberta Pearson, they explain that part of a cult television show is the creation of a niche audience. They explain that for the television industry, this is all about the ads. With the growth of cable and satellite television, the big three networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, can no longer bring in 70 to 90 million viewers a night, currently struggling to break even 40 million. So, they decided to shift their focus to the creation of shows for a niche demographic that certain advertisers would pay a lot to reach. To find these fans, the television industry uses things like marketing strategies to reward loyal viewing and encourage active participation for an additional source of revenue, because super fans will buy anything, from toys to t-shirts to even a USB hub that looks like a TARDIS. Plug it in, press this too. It even makes a sound. It's just that awesome. And speaking of the TARDIS, Doctor Who is one of 5 brands that make up over a quarter of BBC worldwide sales, according to the latest annual report. To find these fans, the television industry uses things like conventions, blogs, and Twitter. According to Alexander Santos of the Atlantic Wire on July 19, 2013, conventions like San Diego Comic-Con International were originally about comic books. Yeah, who would have guessed that? But have been bastardized by the television industry as a launching pad for some of the new shows and to reward fans of returning shows. This chance to watch a pilot, talk with cast members, and have Kelly Cuocos on your tush is enough to entice fans, build hype, and accumulate viewers in the fall. She sounded like right here, just a little above, but it's still totally cow. In addition, you have fans who go online and blog. According to Duffett of Understanding Fandom, the internet has opened up a cheap way for fans to express their fandom. You can easily find a blog, join a conversation, and praise AMC for finally killing off the governor. He was just an evil, evil man. Then you have Twitter. According to the television rating agency Nielsen, August 6, 2013, Twitter helps to bring in viewers during live broadcasts rather than having them watch it later. In their analysis, 29% of shows saw an increase in live viewership because of Twitter. So, hashtag fandom superpowers unite! So while the television industry desires an aspect of the mainstream, they also want the dimension of fans who give up anything for the show, even if it means renting out their parents' basement. Do you know what you're putting into your bodies? Death. Delicious, fandom-flavored death. The television show Fringe aired on Fox from 2008 until 2013, surviving declining viewership because of a loyal group of fans who tuned in weekly to watch Walter Bishop redefine our sanity. With an understanding of the definitions and the television industry, we can now take a bite into some of the good and bad of fandom. Fandom can be awesome, like traveling in a TARDIS awesome, like that's my dream right there. By providing and accepting culture, according to Duffett. However, sometimes fandom can take this culture to bad places. But first, fandom provides that warm, cuddly feeling of community, from Hoovens to Trekkies to Greendale Community College. Take, for example, Bronies. While they make fandom look like the nerdy middle school chess club president that it is, and we honestly can't help but judge them, it does illustrate some of the good of fandom. According to Mike Brunetta of the PBS Idea channel, he states that the Bronies want to celebrate the themes, characters, and ideas as a community because they feel welcome to freely express their fandom, even if what they do is considered quite disturbing by the mainstream. However, sometimes fandom takes this culture to the dark side. Fandom is fanaticism, and sometimes this can go a bit too far for some of the fandom culture. Duffett brings in the idea of a slippery slope, where fans become violently obsessed if their obsession is not met. Take, for example, in 2010, when someone stabbed someone at Comic-Con over a seat. In addition, they can retreat into social isolation, develop narcissistic personality disorders, and even retreat from society altogether. Britt Isoff states in Avatar fandom as a natural religious expression that certain fans of the Star Trek franchise have spent their life trying to fulfill the utopian ideas and mythologies in hopes of leading to a real-world federation. Yep, that's a real thing. And ain't it sad? So while fandom can be this delicious item, it can leave some people running to the bathroom. Scissors cuts paper, paper cuts rock, rock smashes lizard, lizard poisons Spock, Spock smashes scissors, scissors decapitate lizard, lizard eats paper, paper disproves Spock, Spock vaporizes rock, and as it's always been, rock crushes scissors. I'll get that one day. The Big Bang Theory has made being a fan cool. Finally. With characters who identify and obsessively portray their favorite pop culture characters. Today, we have beamed aboard the definitions, entered the dimension of the television industry, before finally taking a bite into some of the good and bad of fandom. As nerds get ready for San Diego Comic-Con International 2014, which is still 106 days away, it's important to remember that everybody wants to be Superman.